Welcome to our Computer Science and Computer Engineering Information session hosted by the PSCO Student Association. I want to welcome all of our speakers as well as all of our students. So thanks for coming, everyone. Today we're just going to talk about what it's like in the field, what it's like studying computer science and engineering, and all that jazz, I guess. So I'll hop on over to the next slide, maybe, if it'll let me. All right, so Abby, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. So essentially, the study of computer science is the study of the principles and use of computers. Alrighty, so at the University of Minnesota, to get a Bachelor's of Science degree for computer science, essentially these are all the credits that you would need to obtain and all the classes that you would need to take just to get into the program.
On the other hand, computer engineering is a branch of engineering that deals with the design and application of computers. And the program requirements have a little less math and a little more science, like physics, and these are the required courses.
Awesome, thank you. So then I will introduce our presenters for the event today. First, we have Jackson Benning, and he will be talking about, he's a current student, so he'll be talking about that. So welcome, Jackson.
Hi, everyone. Oh, do you want to go now? Oh, my bad.
Oh yeah, sorry, I apologize. Yeah, you can just kind of get started and just talk about what it's like in computer science for you.
Yeah, so my name is Jackson Benning. I am a current computer engineering major. So I'm more on the second definition in the major that you guys showed. But a lot of my first 2 years, I am currently a senior, so a lot of my first 2 years were more on the computer science side of things. I think I'd like to add also that there's a third field called electrical engineering, and I think it's important to mention just because electrical engineering is more like power. And so computer engineering, how I see it, fits in between electrical engineering and computer science. So I, in high school, had a huge interest in building my own computer. I ended up doing it. It was a very fun experience, and I realized that it was at as I came to college, I couldn't decide which one I wanted to pursue, computer science or electrical engineering, and computer engineering was the best fit for me because I could continue to do both. I am, as it says there, the president of the HK and Omnicrom chapter. It's basically just a honor society for computer and electrical engineering students, and it's a national organization, and we have a local chapter here at the U.
Awesome. So what has it been like kind of studying computer science at the U for you? Like, or computer engineering, I'm sorry. Yeah, what has it been like?
I enjoyed a lot. I like having as many different fields that I can like kind of look into. So a lot of my focus is in what's called VLSI, which stands for Very Large Silicon Integration, something like that. But basically it's chip design. So any of the chips you have on your phones, computers, etc., that kind of falls under the purview of VLSI. Now VLSI as a field is built on like the electrical engineering underpinnings and like the physics of like how a transistor works and things like that. But we also use a ton of the computer science aspect things of, you know, we want an efficient algorithm to compute this function, etc. So I think it's a good mix of those two. And I would say that the U is really good at providing both good computer science and computer engineering education, actually.
So what is something you would say is a good standard for a computer engineering student? Like what helped you study, and what's a characteristic you see in a good computer engineering student?
I will just say like probably ability to know when you're wrong, because it's kind of like at the end of the day, electrical engineering or computer, I would say definitely more electrical engineering is on this like physics side of things. So it's not subjective at all. There is most of the time only one right way to do things versus like computer science. I would kind of argue there are a couple right ways to do things. So it's one thing to think you know how to solve a problem, and then realize that you don't know how to solve that actual problem when you're trying it. And it's completely okay to admit that you're wrong and seek help from friends. And that's one thing that the club I'm president of offers. We have like tutoring services at the U where we tutor computers, like intro computer science classes or any electrical engineering classes. And I think what I see a lot of the time, even for myself, is like as soon as I admit like, oh, I didn't actually know what I was doing there, it is a lot easier to then figure out what I was doing wrong, how to solve another problem better next time, so I don't get stuck in that same trap of like, oh, I think I know what I'm doing, but it's okay if you don't.
Awesome. So what's your favorite part of studying computer engineering currently?
I would say for my favorite is probably future prospects. You can think about, as any of the devices that we have in our house that is connected to the internet has a chip in it that needs to be designed somewhere. And the number of semiconductor chips in the world is just going to increasingly go up and up and up. So to me, it seems like a very interesting field to get into. And it is not an easy field a lot of the time if you're more on like the design of how do I actually design an efficient chip. And there's always a better way to do things. There's always smaller and smaller chips that we can go and build. And so to me, I don't think the field would get boring at all anytime soon. And the nicety of having a computer engineering background is that I can very easily transition into like a software based role if I would like that in the future, or I can even transform into more of like even a renewable energy based role because I have the same training in electrical engineering that all of the EE graduates do. So I think it provides a wide array of things that I can do after college, depending on whether or not I want to do them.
That was a really great answer, actually. Thank you. And what are some classes that you've taken that you've really enjoyed, or some that are harder within the major that are required?
Okay, so I have two classes. One of my favorite ones is I took a graduate level class on wind energy. And it's taught by this really, really amazing professor named Paul Imbertson, who is not actually a strict research professor. He's just a teaching instructor, but he's one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life and really, really knowledgeable when it comes to renewable energy. And he, over the course of the course, basically just taught us how does a wind turbine work? What is the right aerodynamics for a wind turbine? How do you take that energy and put it on the grid efficiently, et cetera, et cetera? And it was a really interesting kind of like deep dive into one certain subject that now, reading any renewable energy news, I can now apply very easily. The second class is definitely the hardest class I've ever taken. It's called VLSI Design 1, and now I'm in the second one, VLSI Design 2. That class takes about 30 hours of work a week. So it is almost a full-time job in and of itself, and it is absolutely ridiculous. But it is one of those classes, if you go through, there's a lot of really amazing job prospects afterward, especially given the professor has a lot of contacts throughout a lot of VLSI industries. So I think that's probably the two classes that I would mention. Both of those are graduate level classes, though.
Awesome. Is there anything else you would like to add to kind of this little bit?
Yeah, I would just recommend tutoring / TAing. I've been a TA for the computer science department for 2 years, my sophomore and junior year, and now I'm a TA for the EE department. And honestly, it's really nice. It's a good way of kind of making sure that you know the material by trying to teach it to someone else. And it's a really nice job to have on campus. I work about 10 hours a week and I get paid fairly high compared to normal campus jobs, and it's not a ton of work compared to finding another job on campus, if that's what anyone has any interest in.
Awesome. Great. Then I will hand it over to our next speaker. Thank you. So that will bring us to Dr. Interante. Welcome.
Hi. Oh, I've got so much I could say. I'm not exactly sure. Do you want to hear a little bit about my research? I've got some slides I can share with you. Or do you want me to kind of talk more about like what it's like to be a professor, and how I got to this point?
Either way works. I think the other one would be really interesting too. If you want to talk about that too, that would be great.
My research?
I think the second one would be a little bit more fitting, I guess.
Okay, sure. Okay, so so I've been a professor at the University of Minnesota since for about 20 years, and I really feel like it is the best job in the whole world. I mean, I can't say how much I love being a professor, and I guess, I mean, there's so many different reasons why I love this job. I mean, maybe one of the best reasons is you get tenure, so they can never take it away from you. So I never have to worry about getting laid off or, you know, not knowing where my next house payment is coming from. And to be quite honest, that's like the number one most important thing in my mind when I picked this job. But besides that, I feel like I have friends all over the world. I had a picture I was going to show you. I made a map of the US and I put little dots of all the places I've been in the past 5 years. And my job, I have conferences that are held all over the world. I have colleagues all over the world. IEEE, the main conference in my field was in Japan, and I just got to go to Korea. I got to present some work at a conference in Australia. IEEE is going to New Zealand. I've been to Europe, more times than I can count. I get invited to Paris to be on committees in Science Foundation Ireland, flew me to Ireland to review, be a site reviewer, and I spent a week in Argentina giving a class to some people, and I got invited to give a keynote talk in Brazil. And, it's just like, I feel like I get to see the world. I feel like I have friends all over the world. And I feel like I'm a citizen of the world, which is really nice. I mean, my husband's from Mexico, and I'm from the US, but I feel very international because that's what this job is all about. I mean, research is about inventing new knowledge, and new knowledge is being invented all over the world. And so our conferences involve people from all over the world, and I've been volunteering a lot in the leadership of the conferences, which gives me even more opportunity to interact with people from all over the world. So I guess I love that, and it's also super family friendly. It's a lot of school, but I started my family when I was a PhD student, and that was just like, again, I feel so lucky. My advisor, he said, come in and work on your dissertation as much as you want and stay home with your baby as much as you want. And nobody's ever going to add up the number of years it took you to get your PhD. And so just, enjoy your family and enjoy your life, and, and things will, and whatever you choose is fine with me. And it was great. So, I had 2 kids. I got my PhD. I moved to Minnesota, and yeah, so anyway, I teach, of course, during the year when my kids are in school, and in the summer I do research. And so I just felt like it was a really good job in many, many ways. And then I took a very non-traditional path. Okay, so before I graduated from UMass Boston, I actually was a student an undergraduate at 2 other schools. It took a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. It took me 7 years to get my BS or my BA. and then, went to UCLA, went to Chapel Hill. I was 10 years getting my PhD at Chapel Hill. So, I really wasn't on the fast track. But, I still, like last March, I won the IEEE Virtual Reality Career Award, which is, over all of the entire field of virtual reality, one person gets it. And it was me. And I feel like, how is this possible? Like, I love my life. I have a family. I love my job, and yet, I'm also like super successful in my field. And I didn't have to be, like, I want to say I don't work hard. I work really, really hard, but, I didn't have to be perfect the whole way through. And so that's, that's something that's important to remember. There are many, many paths to success, and you just have to find one of them. And happiness along the way is super, super important. So I'm not sure, I'm happy to answer questions if you guys have questions.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think we're gonna have questions at the end for everybody. So thank you so much, Dr. Interrante.
And actually, we have some questions that are kind of our generic ones. So what are some characteristics you've seen in good computer science or computer engineering students?
Oh, good question. I think, what do I look for like most in like a successful student? I think being hardworking is really, really important, because, you get out what you put in. But I think, being able to think independently and being intellectually curious, that's really important. Not so much, asking what do I do and then doing it, but sort of thinking for yourself, like, what would be interesting to do, and, how can I approach this problem in a new and creative way? I think my style of leadership is to sort of encourage, right? Rather than to, more, not so much top down, but, how do I create an environment within which people can flourish and ideas can sprout up?
Yeah, awesome. I really like that. Is there anything you want to kind of elaborate about what research you've been doing on currently?
Yeah, so I'm working with virtual reality technology, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is the potential of using virtual reality to address bias and equity and diversity and inclusion. And this is research that's been going on in the field of social psychology for 60 years or so, but virtual reality technology offers a new potential approaches. And so at the next upcoming virtual reality conference, I've assembled sort of a dream team of leaders from all around the world. I mean, one of the things that's great about being virtual is, you can get people from all over to, they don't all have to be in the same spot. And so we're doing a panel on using virtual reality as a tool to address bias. And so that's something that's dear to my heart. But I also, I have projects with all sorts of people, looking at using virtual reality for stroke rehabilitation, addressing psychiatric disorders, in architectural design, facilitating design, imagination, and yeah, just all sorts of different things. And my lab is very international. We're kind of like the United Nations. We've got students from Iran and Saudi Arabia and Israel and Korea and China, and so it's just, yeah, I love it. I love it. Great groups of people. Everybody has a lot of fun.
Awesome. Is there anything else you kind of want to add to that? Or yeah. Alrighty, and then I guess I'll hand it over to Ronnie and our next speaker.
So next we have Dr. Srivastava. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi. Okay. Beatrice, you sent me a set of questions. So I'm actually going to just read those questions and answer them because I think I put my thoughts over there. So one of the questions was, how did you become a computer scientist or an engineer? And how did you enter your profession? So this actually was long time ago. So I actually started out studying, so remember I was 17 years old. This was 1978 and in India when I started my undergraduate program. And I started out studying real engineering, which is mechanical engineering. That's, you wear a hard hat and you look like an engineer, okay? And then in about my second year, in my first programming class, I spent way too many hours playing chess with a old DEC System 10 that we had received over there in the university. And basically that led to curiosity about how computers worked. And then basically I switched my major. So that was really how I sort of accidentally got into the field. And also there was the advantage that realization that mechanical engineers had to work a lot in sort of hot, uncomfortable conditions like a factory floor, at least initially, while those in computer science in air-conditioned rooms because the computers had to be air-conditioned, not because they cared about the people. So that was a positive. And also, I had a, so that when I started my undergrad program in my college, that was the first year they started an undergrad in computer science. So there was a great coolness factor to it. So all of these are, so I had no idea what career it would lead me to, but these were the kind of factors that impressed a 17, 18-year-old to switch to computer science from mechanical engineering. Of course, I also had the difficulty of explaining to anyone outside my college as to what exactly I was doing. Because remember, this was 1978 and this was in India. And for most people, they thought that what people working with studying computer science were actually kind of doing the same thing that typists did, right? So you were sitting in front of a screen and you were typing away. People just did not understand. And actually, frankly speaking, some of my extended family members and parents, friends, and so on, they were very concerned about my career prospects when I switched from mechanical engineering to computer science. Of course, fortunately, my parents did not share that view and they said, well, figure out whatever you want to do. So that was how I became a computer scientist to begin with. Okay. Then the other thing, part of it is that why did I become a professor? So sort of the similar kind of things that Professor Entrante mentioned. So I first actually started out being a software engineer. So first time when I finished my undergrad degree, I started out working in my hometown as a software engineer. And I would say sometimes getting a really bad first job is a good thing. So for instance, I started working for this one company and the job I was given was to work on writing a commercial grade compiler on a completely unreliable hardware which had to be rebooted about once an hour and doing it in assembly language. And on top of that, my boss, who himself was a hardware engineer, had very little idea of programming, kept on shouting at me all the time for my incompetence in being able to read machine code, which actually made my decision to quit very easy. And not only I quit my job, it also convinced me to go to grad school as well as to go get a PhD. So that was, as I said, my experience was, I guess if my first engineering job experience would have been good, I may not have never become a professor. And why do I love being a professor? I think Vicky already mentioned that one of the best jobs. I would say, yeah, that's one of the things is it gives a freedom to explore all kinds of ideas. Interaction with young people in class, the classes that I teach, as well as those who are, undergrad and grad advisees doing research projects, and especially those who are doing PhDs. They, you kind of spend about 4, 5, 6 years with them, and they kind of become, lifelong. Many of them have become lifelong collaborators, I've been fortunate to have a fair number of very excellent PhD students and who have graduated, and they are sort of all over the world in the industry, in academia, and so on. Another thing that I like and about my job, and which I have personally explored a lot, is that it actually gives a chance to take extended leaves and explore other environments. So for example, let us say if you want to take some time off and go and work in the industry, you can do that. I actually took some time off and went and worked for Amazon for a while, quite a few years ago. Or you can try out entrepreneurship, which is again is something that I have done. As well as you can take some time off and go and live in an entirely different culture, which is another thing that I did for a 3-year period. So you could do these kind of things, and then you can come back and enrich from that environment, and then enrich your teaching and research experience from that. And of course, developing a collaborations and friendships across organizations, countries, cultures, and so on. Again, something that Vicky mentioned. Let's see. Another question was, what's your favorite part of being in this field? Not just the specific profession or what I studied, but I think that the most exciting field, and because I'm in computer science, I will talk about the computer science side of it, that I think that this is a field whose potential at this point seems like limitless. And that is because, think of it this way, right? Anything, any endeavor that requires information and reasoning, computer science is there, right? So which is basically everything. So anything where we use information and reasoning with information to make some decisions, computer science has a potential there, right? So, and the field, and also the fact is the field is just starting. So yes, people had started thinking about computing even before there were electronic computers, but it became real only when electronic computers came, which is just about 80 years ago, right? Actually, roughly about 82 or something to be precise, because the first electronic computers were made in only about 1939 or so. So the field is very young, and there are many, many things to be done. And just compare it to some of the fields. For example, civil engineering. We've had civil engineering ever since the first homes were created, right? And mechanical engineering since the first wheels were created, or maybe I guess sleds. You didn't need wheels over snow, right? And I guess chemical engineering in some sense ever since we started looking. So these fields been there for a long, long time, while computing is very new, and therefore what can potentially be done with it is, we are just at the early stages of it. So the potential is limitless. And the other part that also appeals to me is the fact that at its very basic level, the field requires very little infrastructure. So, I think there are a number of examples just in the last 20, 30 years that a person or a few people with a computer and their creativity can completely change the way we think about things. Imagine Facebook, right? One person wrote a program that has basically connected the whole world. Google, 2 people working with some old computers that they could find in the labs of the professors and some other professors. They thought about some ideas that has completely changed the way we think about information. So this whole field, compared to, let's say, something like aeronautical engineering, if you want to create a new kind of plane, you need a huge amount of infrastructure to be able to build a plane, right? Or carry out at least some experiments with avionics. So this whole field still has the potential of, the 2 people in a garage figuring out, and I guess you need, some completely changed world, and you need 2 people mostly because they can talk to each other, right? Okay. Another question that was asked was, what are the characteristics of a good computer science student as professional? I thought a bit about this. I mean, clearly there were a number of things that, as Vicky said, you have to work hard and so on. But I think that there are 4 points that I put down here. One is you need imagination. And why is a high level of imagination important? Because you have to think about things and work with things that cannot be sensed. And what I mean by that is that, let us say if you're working with materials, you can touch it, you can feel it. But software is always imaginary. It cannot be physically sensed. So you have to sort of think a lot in terms of abstraction. Okay, so a high level of imagination. A second is the ability of abstraction and logical thinking. Again, sort of like math. Okay. A third is attention to detail. Why attention to detail? Because when you take these abstract ideas and implement it into some kind of a thing, like a piece of software, approximately correct doesn't work for programs. And what do I mean by that? So for example, let us say you're working with, like in mechanical engineering, supposing you're trying to build something, a piece of machinery, and you realize that, oh, this thing is a little bit bigger than what will fit into this hole. Well, you can take it the last minute and just go it on a lathe machine and shave it off. It's okay, now it'll fit, right? So you can make kind of local changes that can make things work. But usually for software, you can't do that because a little change can cause everything to break down. So therefore, attention to detail becomes very important. And of course, if you want to solve real world problems, you have to be able to work in some multidisciplinary teams, understand what what the real information, because eventually at the end of the day, the computer scientists are solving information problems. And then how to go about it, but what is the information problem in a real world setting is something that people in the appropriate application domain understand. So you have to understand to them, understand what their problems are, what are their challenging information problems, and what you can do about it. Okay. Let's see. And then one last question. There are a couple of other questions, but I'm going to just sort of wrap it up with one last question. One of the questions was, what are the common classes taken for the major? I actually changed that question a little bit to, what are the common skills learned from the major? Okay, so what can you expect to learn? And then there are lots of courses that essentially are heading towards that. So I would say that there are lots of classes, and you can see the whole curriculum. But in my opinion, they are really focusing on what I would say is a set of core skills and a whole lot of specialized skills. Okay, so what are the core skills? So one core skill is what I would call algorithmic thinking, right? And algorithmic thinking is the foundation of how to make machines do a task. And a classical, of course, is that we ask someone to, sort a bunch of items from the smallest to largest. And most people can do that task beyond a certain age, right? But the idea is to think about how to make a machine do it. And that is the change in perspective, the change in thinking from not just how to do a task, but how to, or not just doing a task, but how do you do a task, okay? Second one is programming. So now, how do you take this abstract idea of thinking about algorithms and convert it into something that will actually do the task? And that really is the programming part of it. Another third thing I would say is what you learn is analysis synthesis. So analysis is all about how do you take a complex problem and break it down into smaller pieces, okay? And synthesis is that how do you take these little solutions to these little pieces and put it together into a solution to the complex problem. And this is the whole thing about software design. So earlier I was talking about algorithmic thinking and programming, but then being able to put all these pieces together. And I would even say that playing around with Legos to playing around with Minecraft, for example, are great ways of learning that kind of skills. Now, this is the kind of skill that even people learn in fields like architecture, as well as in English composition or any kind of language composition, for instance. Then I would say a couple of other skills. Another one is, how do you model the real world in a computer? That's also an important skill because real world has lots of complexity. But being able to figure out that what aspects of the world you need to model in the computer such that you have the sufficient amount of detail, not too less, not too little, and not too much, that you need to solve the problem. And that is an important skill. And the last one I would say is, which is becoming even more important as we live in a world of data, is recognizing patterns from data to be able to learn. So let us say nowadays we're also observing and collecting data about lots of phenomena that are going on, whether that happens to be, scientific phenomenon, whether that happens to people's behavior or whatever else it is. And then being able to be able to recognize patterns from that and potentially do things with it. So at least at a first level, those are some sort of core skills that we teach in, or any computer science curriculum will teach you through a number of different courses. And then there are tons and tons of specialized classes that teach specialized skills, very often about how to apply these kind of skills to one area or another area. Maybe it is, how to make a like computer vision. That means you take some of these skills and apply to the problem of a machine recognizing an image, okay, or whatever else you want to do with it. So there are lots of different specializations that happen. So I'll kind of, after that monologue, I'll stop here if there are any other questions. Okay.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Dr. Sabatnagar.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So a lot of what I wanted to say in some sense has already been said. So let me try to provide a perspective which is complementary to the things that have been spoken already. So I'm sort of slotted into this computer engineering position. Technically, that's because I'm in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. We actually run a joint computer engineering program with the Computer Science and Engineering Department. If you look at the slide that's in front of you, you'll see that I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD degree. In all of these, I did basically the same kind of work. I worked on the same kinds of problems for my thesis for all of these. I have 2 degrees in electrical engineering and 1 in computer engineering. Why? I don't know. So the whole point of saying this is that this notion of talking about electrical engineering or computer science is somewhat arbitrary. There are many overlaps. There's a kind of a continuum. There's certainly parts of electrical engineering that I wouldn't touch. I mean, there are people who sort of do materials, devices, go into the labs, mix compounds. I have no idea how to do that. There are parts of computer science that I would have no idea how to touch, theorem proving, trying to think about kind of highly abstract things that, I don't know, beyond my mental capability. So there's certainly some part of each of these fields that's kind of very different from what I know and do. But there's, in general, if you're an engineer, there's a certain set of things that you don't do just one thing. You do whatever you do things around that. You collaborate with people around you. You learn skills that are different from the skills that you started out with. So for instance, my research is similar to what Jackson talked about at the beginning. I work in the area of chip design. The stuff that I specifically do is building a chip is a complex task. Today's chips have about 100 billion transistors. So if you want to be able to do that with any level of success, there's no way you can build 100 billion transistors one by hand. So you need to automate it. And in order to automate it, what you need to do is to develop algorithms. So you need domain knowledge about chip design. You need to have some knowledge of algorithms, data structures, numerical methods, etc., which kind of conventionally people say is a computer science thing. The chip design stuff and the hardware stuff, a lot of people say is an electrical engineering thing. Like I said, even my own degree granting institutions couldn't agree on that. And then as you're doing that, you sort of cross boundaries as well. So for instance, if I'm trying to build a chip, let's say you have a chip in your cell phone. You put your cell phone in your pocket, you don't really want the pocket to get hot, you don't want your skin to burn, so you really have to design your chip in such a way that it doesn't get too hot. How do you do that? Well, you use some principles from heat transfer. Now, if you go and ask people, where does heat transfer come from? They'll probably say mechanical engineering. But it basically doesn't matter. And this was pointed out earlier as well. In Jaideep's presentation, he talked about the fact that you have to work in an interdisciplinary way. You need to work with societal problems. There are a lot of people in computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering, and indeed all of engineering whose research transcends kind of one particular field. There are people who work with climate change and so on. For example, designing better windmills or trying to perform analysis of big data to try and figure out patterns. And all of these are sort of within the range of things that a computer engineering or computer science professional would do. So what's the takeaway from here? The takeaway from here is that all of these fields are kind of very diffuse. And if you want to look at where you want to grow, it's certainly very important to be very deep. It's very important to have detailed knowledge of whatever you're going into, but it's also important to have a certain level of breadth, because that allows you to have more dialogue, more conversations, and more interesting interactions. So for instance, I gave you this example of my work in chip design. Well, if it's a very exciting time to be in this area, because as you know, there's the technological revolution that's basically changed the way we've lived. And you can see this from probably your childhood till today, and it's going to keep changing from here onwards as well. Now, all of this has been driven by silicon-based technologies. But on the other hand, if you look at the way silicon has progressed, your transistors have become smaller and smaller and smaller until it's reaching some physical limits where you actually cannot make things a little smaller. So people try all kinds of other innovations. They try to kind of build them in 3D structures instead of 2D structures. And there's all kinds of gymnastics that people go through. But then they also look at new materials. So then now you have to sort of work with material scientists and so on and figure out what their problems are and how you can bring their solutions into something that's practical and useful. Now, this forum is for PSEO students, and I guess sort of one of the biggest questions in your mind is probably, how does this affect me? What do I do in terms of a choice of career? I would love to say that what I do is sort of the perfect thing for you, but it would be a lie to say that. I mean, you have to kind of find out what interests you. Why did I get into this field? It's because, well, when I was at the age when I got into an undergraduate program, I really didn't know a lot. I sort of knew that I liked math, I liked science, I liked kind of calculus and that kind of thing. And so I figured, well, I really don't want to be sitting in a lab working on imaginary problems. So why not be an engineer? And as that happened, it turned out that I got into an electrical engineering program. After getting into electrical engineering, I gravitated towards the computer side of things. And then, I mean, that's basically where I am today. So as you make your decision, I think I would say the best thing to look out for is what are the things that you seem to like. There are many challenges in computer science, computer engineering, electrical engineering that are kind of really, really interesting. So the kind of thing you need to think about is, do you like building things? If you like building things, there are many opportunities. You could build robots, you could build chips, you could build wind turbines, for example. You can pursue those kinds of activities. If you like sort of working with math, there are many opportunities for that as well. You can work with discrete math, you can work with optimization problems, you can work with numerical methods. There's really a lot of opportunities, and many of these can actually be applied to real world problems. And that's the beauty of the field that we are in, or virtual reality for that matter. There are kind of some beautiful computational problems that are in there. So if the other kind of thing is, if you are an abstract thinker, if you sort of like the more mathematical flavor, there's a lot of really interesting stuff you could do in theoretical computer science. So I think you have to sort of look at what your strengths are, what your interests are, go in and use that to decide what you'd like to pursue. And as you go along, just look around you, because what interests you today may not necessarily be what interests you tomorrow. So look around, be curious. That's the number one quality of a successful student in this field, or indeed in any field whatsoever. Be curious, look, try to find out more, look around you, learn as much as possible, and you'll never regret it. I'm not sure if I answered all the questions, but I hope this was useful.
That was great, thank you. And then that will move us on to our final speaker of the day, Dr. Heimdall. Welcome.
Thank you. I think, so I'm Mats Heimdall. I'm the head of the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Minnesota. So I have to wrestle with Jadip and Vicky every day. I think I'll talk about, I want to answer your questions, but maybe talk, I think I came about this maybe a little different path than other people. Maybe not. I think
go ahead however you want.
I think we've all come to this in somewhat non-traditional ways, because I meet two kinds of people really when you're out there in industry and in studying, and students. Some of them know what they want to be. They have a goal and they work towards that goal. I'm going to be a doctor, and they work towards that. I'm going to be a lawyer, and they work towards that. A lot of them are very successful, and then they get there and they're happy with their careers. Frequently though, it seems like people get there and then they realize maybe it wasn't cracked up as to be what you thought it was going to be. So you might not enjoy the journey there, and you might not enjoy when you get to the destination. I've sort of followed a different philosophy. I just stayed away from stuff I don't like. And that has kind of pushed me towards this field of computing. There are a lot of things I realized I do not like. I worked in all kinds of different things, and when I was younger, and there were just things that you didn't like. I mean, working in repetitive things where you didn't have to think, that was just, that's not for me. Working with people that might not think the way you do became annoying, and it sort of pushed you in this direction of computing. So I grew up in Sweden, and I joined a computing program there, and I was very reluctant to do that because I enjoyed my skiing, I enjoyed my partying, I enjoyed hanging out with my friends. I enjoyed computers too, but I was afraid that all the people that were in computing were going to be just nerds, and it was going to be dreadful to be a computer scientist. And it was a girl I played badminton with a lot at the time, and she told me, you know, you like this, you like partying, you like your skiing, you like playing badminton with me, you like this, and you like this, and you like computers. If you go there, there's a good chance you're going to meet a whole bunch of people that's just like you. And that made me feel better. So I joined the program, and she was right. Yes, of course we have this super nerds that the only thing they care about is computers and computing. Good for them. Right? You had the people that partied way too much, and that's what they cared about, and that didn't end well generally, but they were there. And then there were a whole bunch of people just like me. So you found your group, you did your homework, you did your computing things, you went skiing together, you partied together, you had a blast, right? So it was just something that was fun. And then I got an opportunity to go to the US to visit a university. I was going to be there for 6 to 9 months, University of California, Irvine. And that was a lot of fun. And then there was a lady I started working for there, and she asked if I wanted to stay and get a PhD. And I frankly had nothing better to do. And if you're from Sweden, that's like being from Minnesota. You get to Southern California, you can live on the beach. I mean, and you can study computing and get paid to do it. Life was just perfect. So I stayed and learned more about computing, and it turns out it was just a fun career. It was a lot of fun people, a lot of fun things to study. And I think some of our other panelists have pointed out that one of the beauties of computing is that it is everywhere. So it doesn't matter what you're interested in. If you're interested in airplanes, they're basically flying computers. You're interested in cars, they're driving, they're rolling computers. You're interested in retail or fashion or other kinds of things. When you look at a company like Target, it's basically a computer company with stores attached to it, right? The computing is the core of that company to make sure that supply chains work, to support their e-commerce work, to support all their HR and business systems so that they work. The fact that they sell stuff is almost incidental here. That's where the money comes in. But what makes it work is computing. Banks, insurance companies, pretty much everything, right? So it doesn't matter where your interests are. If you're in computing or computer engineering, you can typically find a niche and a company and an industry that you really, really like. And most of you are probably not going to go on and be professors. Most of our students in computer science go on out in industry, right? But the beauty of this is that there's not going to be a shortage of jobs. If there's a downturn in one segment of the economy, it picks up somewhere else. And they're going to need computer scientists, and job prospects are excellent, right? So that's how I ended up doing computing. I mean, everything else was just, I don't want to do this, right? Computing sounds fun. And then you end up where you are. And that's kind of why I ended up in academia as well, because my advisor realized I probably wouldn't like working for the man. I argued a lot with her about things. So she said, you probably get fired. You should probably go into academia where you can argue with people and argue with your students and just get paid to do that. And she was right. I really enjoyed doing that. But we're keeping a good eye on what's happening in industry, so we can guide the students in the right direction. So the prospects are fantastic. Studying computer science or computer engineering. So now, so that's kind of how I ended up in computing. And my favorite part of this, I think, is the versatility of what we're doing. There are no limits, right? Some of our other panelists talked to this. I'm not going to belabor that point. Similarly with what a good student should be in computing, what a good computing professional needs to know. Yes, of course, you're going to need the technical chops to do what you need to do in terms of your the math that you need, the computer science that you need, the programming and development skills that you need. But there's one thing that gets shortchanged a little bit, I think, in our education, and that we don't appreciate as much in the students that we educate and the students that get hired, right? And that is that you need to be a good person. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to work in teams. You need to be able to navigate conflicting requirements and people that might not agree with each other, and all of those kinds of people things, right? Being a professional software developer is not a solitary job. You're going to be working in groups. You're going to be talking a lot. You're going to be negotiating a lot. You're going to be socializing with people a lot and communicating. And those skills are incredibly important, right? And now it's worth mentioning here that we have 2 computer science degrees at the University of Minnesota. We have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science through the College of Science and Engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science through the College of Liberal Arts. We own both of those degrees in our Computer Science and Engineering department, but the course requirements are slightly different. And the different companies, they prefer different characteristics in their students. Some of them prefer to hire this College of Science and Engineering students because they have a little more technical depth. Other companies much prefer the BA students because they have, I don't know how to phrase that really, but maybe better social skills than some of the engineering students. And they really appreciate that aspect of the computing professional, right? So they prefer those students. So either way, you're going to be successful, whether you go into CLA for a computer science degree or the College of Science and Engineering for a computer science degree. It depends on your interests. really. You want to stay on the more narrow and super technical track, go to CSE. You want to explore other interests and have a little more freedom in what you select in your studies, go for the BA degree over in CLA. So I see, what else was there? Good. What is the process of becoming a computer scientist? You got to go to school. There you might see, and now all of you are in the PSEO program, so you're good students. You know how to navigate the academic environment. I think a good computer science or computer engineering education is crucial to be successful long term. You read a lot about boot camps and coding academies and those kinds of things. Yeah, that might get you to get started, but it's not gonna, it makes it difficult to build a career. This is a field that changes a lot. And the goal of an education is not to teach you specific tools or languages or other things. It's to teach you how those tools and languages work, why they work, when they work. So when some new fad comes along, you can pick it up very, very quickly. And it's not going to change the world. You're going to look at it and see it's the same old crap we worked with 5 years ago. It's just a different syntax, right? It's a different language, but I know how this class of languages work, which makes it easy for you to pick it up and move on, right? So that adaptability, that continuous learning is going to be crucially important for success. So I think you've seen our undergraduate curriculum. That's fairly easy to look at, right? Some of the bottlenecks to get into our major, if you join the University of Minnesota, you have to pass these technical courses. So we look at your technical GPA. And unfortunately, in computer science, we have to have a cutoff there. So we can't let all the students into our major because it's just too many. But if you're a good student, you should have no problems meeting our cutoff in the technical GPA. I think we're at 2.5 GPA, which most students have no problem in maintaining when you're studying. So you just can't tank all your calc and physics and science classes. But if you do okay, you'll be just fine. So I think I'm going to stop there and just encourage you guys to pursue what you're interested in and stay away from stuff you don't like. Because we're spending a lot of time at work. And if you don't like what you're doing, life is going to be miserable. And you might as well discover that early and try to pursue something that you like. And I think computing for a lot of people, whether they think they're going to like it or not, is something that's very intellectually stimulating and provides this flexibility and freedom to really pursue a career that you're really going to like, right? Because you can choose what industry you're going to work in. And that's a lot of fun. So I think I'll leave it at that and open up for questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then I'll throw it to Abby, who is moderating our questions. So if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat, anyone. And then we have some that were sent beforehand from our RSVP. So Abby, if you want to take it away.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So this is just a general question for everyone. Do a lot of students going into the computer science major already know how to code before they start college? Anyone can answer.
Oh, can I answer that?
Sure, go for it.
I have some strong feelings about that. Some of our most successful students are the ones that have no background in coding whatsoever when they start. It's like a lot of things. If you learn a little bit about something, it can be very dangerous and you get bad habits. And the worst thing you can do is to come in, I think this is true for any major really, and think you know stuff because you probably don't. You can be an expert in a language without understanding how to program. Those are two different things, right? So no, you do not need to know how to code at all. We'll take care of that. In fact, if you're arrogant about your coding skills, it can hurt you long term because you're not absorbing the fundamental concepts because you think you know it all. And that is a very dangerous thing that I think our student rep in the beginning said, you have to be able to acknowledge that you don't know something. And that's a powerful thing to say, well, I actually don't quite understand why we're doing it this way. I was just taught how to do it that way. But understanding why you're doing it, that's really the key that's going to make you successful. And if you come in without preconceived notions, that's easier to absorb, it seems. So don't panic if you haven't taken coding courses in high school, right? You'll be doing just fine, and you'll be caught up with everybody else fairly quickly. And if you're a good student, you have the opportunity to leapfrog a lot of other people that may be focusing on the mechanics of how to do something as opposed to the fundamentals of how to do something. So don't worry about it.
Great answer. Does anyone else have anything else to add on to that?
I think it helps to be a logical thinker, and I think it helps to have an attention to detail, because if you put that semicolon or if you don't put that semicolon, the computer really cares. And so, like, my husband's an artist, and he and I are very similar in many ways, but we're also very different in many ways. And I just think he's great at what he does, and he's much better at what he does than I could ever be. But I think I'm better at what I do than I think he would have a hard time maybe being a computer scientist, because the idea that the same thing happens when you do the same thing, that kind of just the sort of it does help to be sort of like mathematically inclined in terms of that type of thing.
That makes sense. Okay, and then this is a recent question. Is there an advantage in computer engineering over computer science, or vice versa, in terms of job prospects?
I think I want to speak on this one. I think I'm just as strongly opinionated on this question as Professor Heimdall was on the previous one. I will say I think computer engineering is just better in terms of job prospects, because I'd like to argue you're doubling what you can do after college. I have the starting computer science education that all computer science majors have. And I also have the entire electrical engineering education that all electrical engineers have. So with that, I can go heavily into electrical engineering, or I can go heavily into computer science. And I think that is crucial to kind of broadening those job prospects that you could potentially get.
I can follow up on that. So I look at this slightly differently from what was just said. If you're looking at whether you'll get a decent job or not, you're going to get a decent job if you're a good student in any of these fields. Now the question is, are you going to complain about having only 3 offers as against 4 offers? Well, you can have all those complaints, but basically you're going to do just fine in any of these fields. Where I do agree is that I think computer engineering does give you a little more of a base, a little more of an exposure to both sides of the picture. And then you can use that as a stepping stone to go in one direction or the other, or in both. Having said that, none of this is a barrier. If you are intellectually curious, you can start anywhere, you can go anywhere, you'll do just fine.
So let me add a little bit to it. I guess especially I will refer to the other part about the BA versus BS in computer science. I would say that it really is a matter of whether you are, I mean, what kind of jobs you're looking for. Earlier, I had said that, wherever there's information, or decision making, any of these kind of things, then computer science is applicable, right? And I think the real difference between these two degree programs becomes the, whether you have taken some of the requirements that the College of Science and Engineering asks you to do, or CLA. And based on those, you will end up doing sort of working for different kinds of companies. If let's say if you want to go and work for one of the core sort of computer and very often computer manufacturing kind of companies, then they will probably expect you to have a lot more of the engineering background, and therefore probably with the BA, the chances are less. Or even let us say software companies that are working on the some of the system side of software. Let's take as an example, supposing you want to go and work for Facebook. If you want to go and work in how to speed up the way they are, using their servers for managing all this data that is out there, you probably are a bit better off getting a BS in computer science, because you will have a better understanding of the underlying, engineering aspects and how to optimize and so on. On the other hand, Facebook has a whole group that is working, well, the application side, which is, the Facebook communities and how Facebook does its viral marketing, or the Facebook for social good and all those kind of things. You probably are better off having a background in psychology or sociology and things like that, and therefore having taken some courses from those areas, and then probably a BA in computer science is better suited for you. So it really depends between BA and BS as to, just to give as an example, as to which part of Facebook do you want to work in, and then you can sort of extrapolate from that.
And I also want to mention, so there's computer science and engineering, but there's also, computer science like computational biology, or, computer science and design, or, I work with a lot of people in like psychology. And so, there's computer science and medicine, for example. So, we talk a lot about, computation plus X. And so there are many other possibilities.
And being the head of the Department of Computer Science, I'm contractually obligated to say that computer science is best. No, I think these are very good points. And if you're interested in computing, or you're interested in mechanical engineering or chemical engineering or aerospace engineering, I would encourage people to if you pursue those degrees, take as many computing courses as you can. Right, because it turns out that most mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers, and electrical engineers, they end up developing software. That becomes their job. It's a huge part of their job, and oftentimes they're not prepared to do it, and that leads to some of the problems we're having in the software industry, that with just poor quality and other things. People are basically thrust into jobs they might not be prepared to do. Super smart, super good engineers, but they don't know bupkis about computer science. So if you want to pursue other engineering disciplines or other majors in general, getting a decent foundation in computing is a good idea, because there's a good chance you're going to be doing some of that in your job moving forward, right? So, and I do believe computer science majors gets the highest starting salary in the college. Just a data point.
You had to put in that plug.
Yeah, I have it. It's, as I said, it's in my contract.
All right, that was really great. I have another meeting to head to, crazy. But if anyone wants to stay and still ask questions, or if any of our presenters want to stay and answer questions, that's completely optional. That would be awesome. So have a great night, everyone. Thank you for coming, and especially to our presenters for giving so many great insights.
Yeah, before we break now, so if some of you are interested in computer science and want to learn more about our department, or computer engineering, ECE, they're right next door, fantastic department, electrical and computer engineering. Shoot us an email and we'll be happy to talk to you, or whenever this craziness is over, give you a tour or meet with you in the department. So don't be shy to reach out to me or any of the panelists here, and we'll connect you with the right people.
And the two departments work very closely together. We are in the same building. We are forced to work closely together by physical proximity, but we get along pretty well. We have collaborations from one side of the house to the other. So really, it's not necessarily an either or choice that you need.
In fact, actually, the creation of the bachelor's in computer engineering was really a collaborative enterprise between the two departments. So.
Yeah, no, and it depends on your interest. I think the computer engineering degree is something that we're not doing well in computer science, right? There's more hardware close. But these are the kinds of things that you need to explore when you get there. The first year is going to look very similar regardless of what you decide to do. So please reach out and we'll make sure you.
Awesome. Thank you for those additions. And you can drop your emails in the chat. That would be great. That will definitely help people out.
And then just to touch on what Beatrice said and what Ronnie just said, thank you guys for presenting today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Great.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Professor Hemdahl, are you sure that top chip making companies don't pay more than those top software companies?
We're looking at averages.
Yeah, actually,
a fair point there.
Max, I think the numbers I saw were slightly different, but basically we're kind of splitting hairs here.
Yeah.